Hey guys, Ted with Nerdarchy here, for nerds by nerds. With me today is Dave, and we're here to talk about building your campaign. You've been a GM for quite a long time, as we said before. Our group has been together about 18 years. How long before that were you running campaigns?
My gaming goes back like 27 years, and I started running games fairly early. So I would say my mid to late teens. So I was probably like between 14 and 16 when I ran my first game. And I'm 38 now, so you folks out there can do the math. But real quick, our setting's a little different than normal. We're here hanging out at a picnic. It's Mother's Day, so if you happen to be watching this, I don't know if I'll actually put it up tonight on Mother's Day or not. But happy Mother's Day to the mothers out there. And so me and Ted are just sitting here talking about campaign building and different strategies that we've used. You want to tell me how do you do it?
All right. Well, my experience is nowhere near as much as Dave's. I've run games, over the years. Probably stretching back, 18, 20 years myself, but nowhere near as frequent as Dave. And I've rarely run a campaign to any kind of successful completion. I've never done, a total party
kill. How many
kill.
campaigns do you think you've run over the years?
Well, I would say, flop campaigns, maybe a dozen or two tops before, our regular group kind of got, hooked up. And then maybe 2 or 3 dozen tops.
Me and you, our group, we've been together for, we figured it out in 17, 18 years. How many groups were you in before you started gaming with me?
I would say probably 3, but none of them like any kind of long lasting. It was like a couple of friends that every once in a while, hey, let's just do something. And it was in that situation, there was almost always one particular DM. And then other than that, there was like maybe 1 or 2 other groups of just a pickup game here and there. And the D&D rules, second edition, there weren't structure. We had DMs that would throw a character in the game so that he could give the character something so that he could use it in another game later. So it was really
kind of sounds like cheating.
yeah. I mean, it really was. It just was a situation where we were young, 14, 15 years old. And you didn't know how to, have a campaign that was going to last, how to have a campaign that really meant something to the players.
So it sounds like you never really had like any real mentorship when it comes to your gaming.
Absolutely.
My experience is a little different because I started gaming with a group, and we gamed regularly, once a week, a couple times a week. Where we were all in our teens, and there was the older kid that like kind of took the reins, and he was the game master, and he was really good. And and then a couple of us would take turns running different games. After a while, after we're playing for a while, he's like, guys, it'd be nice to actually play in addition to running the game.
That phrase sounds familiar, almost like you've said it to us before.
Right. Well, and that's how it goes. And, I was very fortunate, and unfortunately, my first game master was taken from me way too early. He ended up with leukemia and passing away at 19.
Wow.
It still makes me sad to think of it now.
That's
he was a great guy, and he was a great game master.
That's great. Well, sorry for the loss.
But so after I stopped gaming with that group, I think there was like one other that I kind of dabbled. Like I started grabbing some of my non-gamer friends and be like, "Yo, you should do this thing. It's really cool." And they're kind of looking at me funny. It was the late 80s, early 90s, so I don't know if any of you guys can catch my drift on that. But they're like, okay. But so I did a couple sessions with some stoners, and then it just kind of fizzled until a couple years later, I was like, I want to game again. And my brother, my youngest brother, was getting to that age where I could hang out with him, and he's getting more mature. So I was like, I got Ryan, who's one of our fellow Nerdarchists.
He was about the same age as your son.
Yeah, when we first started. Now, and then Ted is my brother-in-law, so it was my girlfriend's younger brother, and I knew he was into it. So And then I had another friend that I used to game with off and on. So we kind of pulled them together and said, let's do this thing, let's game.
And I had already had some a few years of gaming experience with my friends, but it never had that serious game where the player where your character was honestly fearing for his life and this and that. There was challenge and whatnot, but I mean it was kind of like the movies. The good guys are always going to win and whatnot. So
I think in my early campaign building, everything was very episodic, where there wasn't an overarching theme or campaign per se. It was just had some players. They were going to do a quest, then they were going to do another quest, and things didn't necessarily always link up unless maybe on the last quest they found a map to the next quest,
right,
which may have had nothing to do with
the first one,
the first one, other than they found the map and the treasure. But as I matured as a gamer, I started coming up with ideas and concepts, and we actually started building a world with it was me, Steve, and then later you, Ted, and Nate got involved, and Ryan all got involved, and we built the shared world, and that's the first time we really did like a campaign,
right?
And we kind of mapped out like some ideas, like some big grandiose ideas,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone took a little piece of it and made it their own, and we all did it. I wouldn't say with our own personal style.
Mm-hmm.
Until one day I read something that totally changed my concept of game design from the campaign design,
mm-hmm.
from that, and that was it was a D&D supplement. It might have been the World Builder's Guide or the Dungeons Builder's Guide, but it was like what it said is to basically start small and work your way out.
And that's really the problem that I tend to have. I do a lot of reading, and we all sit back and watch movies, and you see these grandiose story arcs and plot lines that to me, I'm like, wow, this is appealing. I want to give my players this experience. And I've had a handful of campaigns that I've started off with, all right, here it is. And you thrust a storyline on a character that they really, if the person is sensible, they're going to run away screaming for their lives. But the players controlling those characters sit back and they say, well, this is the game, so I have to just push this aside and be a part of it. And I've had times where the character just starts to say, you know what, I'm out, and then the NPC has to persuade them in some way, shape, or form, either through bribery or just gentle persuasion. And I'm not one of these strong arm DMs that will force it. But it's kind of like nudge, nudge. This is the game here, guys.
Well,
this is,
yeah, when you're running that game and you've thought from A to Z how it's all going to work out and how cool it's going to be and how big and climatic the last scene's going to be, and all of a sudden they throw you a monkey wrench and totally just F all that work you put into it. And especially if you actually went and did a lot of writing, creating NPCs, and you made the last dungeon before you made the first one for some reason. And I totally get that, and that's why, like, when I learned this one simple concept, I latched onto it. I've never let go. I love it. Like when I'll create a campaign like that, with this big arching storyline, right? But here's how I do it: I write down like 3 sentences to describe what the end thing is,
mm-hmm.
and then I kind of zoom in on where the characters are, and then I just weave little plots into it, and some of them involve that big arching storyline, and some of them don't. And I just let the players go where they go, because I did learn that lesson the hard way. I did learn that I can do all this work, and I can make the last dungeon first, and man, was it cool. But it didn't matter, because the players didn't want to do it, or your game didn't last long enough. Like, there's so many ways for it to totally bomb.
The campaign not lasting long enough, that's our group to a T. There's always something coming up. Someone's got an idea for a new game.
Super nerd ADD is like a disease we have or something.
There's always something coming up. Someone's like, man, I got a great idea for a game. Let's put this one on hold. let's do an edition change. Let's try out this other game thing. I've got a veritable laundry list of characters that it's like, but what about this guy and what about that guy, and it's just it's sad to be like, well, like these guys are sitting on a climactic point. They're standing outside the stronghold. They've got pounds and pounds and pounds of ridiculous loot. The castle's right there. We can challenge the king.
We just found out one of our companions, their father may be the villain of the whole thing or not. We're not sure, and we're about to find out.
And it's right there. And years have gone by, and I mean like at least 6 since this campaign has died. And it's like, yeah, there's no going back to that. One of actually Ryan from Nerdarchy, has literally moved away and come back after being so halfway across the country for 3 years. So but I mean that's the kind of thing that we have to deal with. So
as gamers, I think it's pretty typical. I've heard of groups where they run the same campaign and the same character for like 10 years plus. And I don't know, God bless them, I don't know how they do it. Because as a DM, I get burnt out after a while, We used to run a game every single weekend. On Saturday, come hell or high water, if you didn't show up, man, you were a piece of shit. You were the worst person on earth. We don't care if somebody died or you were having a baby or whatever. You just showed up. It was like your job, only more important.
It's true.
And then, we all have families now. We got married. We got kids. So it's harder and harder to get together and game. So
we've had numerous 6-month hiatuses because life got in the way, and it's like, man, what happened to the grand old days?
Well, and as far as campaigns go and building a campaign, we're more likely to do a pickup game than we are to do
a long-standing game.
Yeah, I mean, one of the last long-standing games we did was probably you running off the Mutants and Masterminds system. Ted had put together a kick-ass Dresden Files game, where if you're not familiar with Jim Butcher's work, Dresden Files, it's considered urban
fantasy.
Urban fantasy. It's modern times.
Magic exists in modern times. It's kept away from the from Mr. Joe Public because basically, if you talk to a person in real life today, is magic real? They're all going to say no. And the magic world or the magic community pretty much just kind of helps that along. They'll deny it.
Oh, here's the perfect analogy, right? If you ask a ninja if ninjas are real, what does a real ninja say?
No,
of course not. It's make believe, made up. That's silly.
So magic is the same way, and that's just how things are done.
Well, also magic, but also not only magic, but
supernatural.
Supernatural. Your fairies, your fae, your undead, demons and dragons. It all exists, but it's almost like another layer to the world that people don't know about.
Right. There's like under town. People live in the in the sewers and whatnot. There's a lot of really cool spins off of your typical stuff. Like your mindless zombies, they're mindless, but since they don't have a beating heart, the necromancer who summoned the zombie needs to have a drummer, which basically, even if it's just, a guy beating a book against his leg or someone pounding on the table, as long as there is something to represent the beating heart, the zombies can keep going.
Well, so Ted started this campaign, and it was really cool. And we had all these players, and they were really into it. And we had an Indian shaman. We had my character, who was basically a college kid who got possessed by a Shaolin monk, the spirit of a Shaolin monk. We had a mummy. We had a couple of wizards.
We had a
golem.
We had a golem. Originally, we had a character who was playing a wizard and his fey minion that he wound up, somehow tricking into servitude. And something happened, and they're like, what, we need to scrub this. And they went with a different concept, and the guy had a loosely intelligent golem, and I do mean that term loosely. It was
Comical.
It was comical.
He did a good job. And then the guy he served was like this trickster leprechaun, deal maker, fake character.
Right.
And like, so it was Ted's campaign. So Ted, why don't you tell me about, since the game is no longer in existence, it would kind of fizzle. Why don't you tell me about the campaign?
Well, the whole idea was this is my one of my failures was I wanted to do this huge epic, and it was like, okay, well, I started off with a concept that I absolutely created. There's nothing in the books that I know of to this point about an ultimate evil. That obviously if there's all these powers, then what's to say that there isn't something bigger behind it? So my initial concept was,
wait a minute. So us as the players, we adopted a name for it, the EOE.
The essence of evil is kind of how it was done, and the whole idea behind my campaign. Shout out to my buddy Will. He was my co-DM, even though he was many states away. We said, okay, well, we're gonna run it like this, and we come up with, we got the characters involved in a way. We had an NPC who was kind of like the filtering agent to answer questions and this and that, and his whole backstory was kind of mysterious and hidden.
Well, from a player standpoint, to us, he seemed like the counterpoint to the EOE. So he was like the EOG.
To a point, he kind of was, but only to a point.
Indirectly, he didn't get involved directly.
Right.
He from what we saw, he worked through champions, which happened to be us.
Right, and that's kind of the way the evil side was going to work as well. So what Will and I would discuss is say, okay, well, this is what we're going to present to the players for the week, for the session, and then based on what they do, we would then have another phone call and say, all right, well, this is what's happened. How is evil responding? And so I think originally started off there was like 7 to 9 players, and there was going to be 7 champions of evil. So while they were focused together doing whatever the session plot was, we had a note, a Word doc going back and forth email of, well, this is what this evil champion is doing. And we got, several months into the game, and we realized that, number one, bad guy is gonna win. There's no way for the players, unless they just start seriously investigating and dealing with these champions, that there's no way that they're going to be able to turn this tide of battle. And it was really a serious bummer on my part, and I couldn't really just spew out to the guys. It's like, look, you got this going and you got that going. I had a couple of comments from I wish I could remember the NPC's name. Do you remember?
Roth? I do remember.
Henry Roth. Is that it?
I don't know his first name, but the last name was Roth.
Okay, yeah, it was definitely Roth.
Because I knew, because I actually thought that he actually may be the ultimate evil, because I happened to work for a company with the same name.
So, I had, Roth make a couple of comments of like, look, maybe you should, try this, or, a couple sentences at the start of the game to say that, look, there wasn't any, power meter that the players could display, but, I tried to let it loose that, all right, well, evil's looking like they're getting the upper hand here, without making it sound too cheesy. But I mean, it was really...
Well, let me cut in there, Ted. And this is what I've learned as a game master, over umpteen years. There's two truths. Your players are smarter and will do things you will not expect. And 2, your players are stupider and will do things you will not expect than you think. And there's like almost no way to counter it. Like you look at something, it's obvious, no brainer.
Oh,
and your players are walking around like zombies bumping on the walls, or you go, there's no way they're figuring this one out. I'm going to get the last laugh, and in like 2 seconds they undo your puzzle.
Yep. Depends upon who you have at the table and how much how much caffeine they've had that night. But when again we got to a point. I really had no way of using the campaign material that was prepared. I had no way of bringing it back around. And then the game, decides that we're going to get back together, or the group, because we, again, went on a hiatus, and the group gets back together because I think we mentioned it in an earlier video. Our friend was like, man, I need to chuck dice. I need to kill shit. So we brought the band back together again.
And we were doing something different.
And we were doing something else. But I threw in, some Dresden stuff, and I mixed some stuff up. And again, I got back on the phone with Will, and I'm like, all right, we need to put a different spin on this. So
well, I got a question. Let's stop there for a
sure.
second. How much material did you actually create that never got used?
Hours worth. I mean, I literally had like a 15-page document worth of campaign notes that.
So if you could redo things, what would you change?
Well, I mean, my beginning would totally wouldn't happen until the campaign was a year in, just because the foundation was wrong. As I sat back, I looked at it as, again, when I said you're presenting characters with a choice that they wouldn't make. I basically took a first level character and said, yeah, it's your job to save the world. And half the group was ready to be like, yeah, I'm walking. Because it doesn't fit the character.
That makes sense.
Now, I was happy with my preliminary. I actually met with each character individually. It might have been over the phone. It might have even been by email. But I met, essentially one-on-one with every single character and got them to a point. We've the typical gaming thing that's out there is, all right, you're all in a bar, and you're all in a tavern, however you want to look at it, and that's okay and cool for when you're doing a pickup game, but when you're honestly looking to have a serious game, you need to put work into it. I've had GMs with I spent 2 months worth of running around meeting all 7 players individually to get them to the point where the campaign was going to start. I'm not willing to do all of that, but getting preliminaries, getting backgrounds from the characters, and getting them to a point where you can get them all to the same place so they can react to a single event. That's key. That really makes for a good campaign start. And I was happy with that progress. But rather than getting them to a central location, getting them to react to a fantastic element or a magical element so that the PCs can all see, okay, we all see this shit, we're all for real, how do we deal with it? And then let them build a camaraderie, let them build their power base, and then once they've established themselves as the quote-unquote heroes in the area, then present them with that invitation to Roth's Mansion and say, okay, well, it's clear in your ventures that you guys are a force to be reckoned with. Let me introduce myself as as this proponent to the fantastic element and
EOG.
Yeah, I'm the EOG. However you want to look at it.
Essence of goodness to counter the essence of evil. But yeah, and that happens a lot too. And it's not so much that you didn't do enough preliminary work. It's just, it sounds like to me that the preliminary work was actually just in the wrong area.
Yeah.
Where it was stuff that you're going to get to down the road, where there's stuff you needed to do next week. You end up having to rush through and not really cement it the way you want it. And that's always one of the struggles with building a campaign, especially a long spanning one. And, it's a mistake I see Tate made over and over because, we're gamers, we're creative as the game master. And when someone wants the game master, it's because they have creativity and they want to let it out.
Right, absolutely.
And sometimes the humble beginnings aren't as exciting as the big climatic battle. So you want to start there, but you'll save yourself a lot of heartache and headache by starting at the beginning.
Right.
And it's just a lesson that we learn. Ted was just talking about his game he ran, and we ran it in Mutants and Masterminds. I'll drop a link below so you can check out that system if you're not familiar with it. But, what was nice about Mutants and Mastermind, it's not really a level system.
Yeah, you basically, it's a point buy system, and you have the ability to honestly just, purchase whatever you want. It's completely classless, so you can build your character however you want. And there are books out there that let you take it into any genre you want, and it's in my opinion, it really is great. I was a huge lover of D&D for years, and I thought that there couldn't be anything better. And as we said before, we did a superhero game, and it wasn't a flop. I mean, things worked, but just the character dynamics were so far apart that it was just utterly ridiculous. We had 3 or 4 players in the party who were gods to the rest of them, and it just really wasn't fair. So Dave said, "Well, let me find something better." And with Mutants and Masterminds, as for running games, it's fantastic because when you're sitting there planning material for D&D, you not only have to look at the XP values of your monsters and the CR ratings to make sure that you're properly challenging and then rewarding XP along the level that you want, because it's like, okay, well, this guy's got this type of CR, but I've got a weak party because they rolled crappy stats, which means this CR3 is just going to wreck them. Whereas other times it's like, yeah, we got some powerhouses in the party. They really work well together. They built their team together so they could wreck a CR 2 levels above them because they're that good of a unit. So you've got this give and take. Whereas with Mutants and Masterminds, it's like, yeah, you get 1 power point, for tonight's session. If you did a lot of stuff, or if you hit a milestone, you get 2. So it's you don't have to deal with that. And when it comes to the actual game, I'm not going to get into the
well, what I really need to know is it's a centralized mechanic that everything's based off of. So it's really as simple as addition and subtraction and knowing where things are at.
Right. So you have the ability to say, all right, well, I'm going to pour this monster out, and I know that he wants to be able to do, this type of power or hit with this kind of force, and you just work off of this system, and you don't need to go pull out books and spend hours creating an NPC unless he's pivotal. You can just do it off the fly, and almost every single NPC that these guys fought, I spent 30 seconds on. I just said, okay, well, this is what I want. I think maybe 3 or 4 characters over the course of what? I run it for a year?
A little while, yeah.
Yeah, so I made 3 or 4 characters over the course of that that time frame. It just everybody else that they fought was unimportant, unessential, and I operated off of just that central mechanic and said, boom, done.
Yeah, so you're able to do everything ad hoc.
Absolutely.
So, like I said, we'll put a link to that blog post from our website. So, if you want to check out that system, it's a great way to pretty much play any game you want. But as far as campaign design goes, where would you say? What would you say to a DM just starting out? A new game master.
Well, I mean, where I stand now, I would say, start off getting your feet wet, and I hate saying it, but try out a pre-made mod. Check out one of the ones that's already been done. They basically provide you everything that you need, and it gives you a pacing that. If you don't have a mentor, if you don't have someone that's telling, that's guided you, if you don't have, a history of successful games that you've been a part of to take from, then pick up one of those, ready-made mods. But, if you've got some kind of group, do your lesson. Start small. Get the characters together, even if you got to say, all right, you're all let's have it. And
well, even what you're saying about the module, there's a lesson there, right? If you run a ready-made module, there's certain elements in that you can actually incorporate into your campaign world. Maybe there's the tavern already there. Maybe there's a town already there. Maybe there's a handful of NPCs that aren't going to be actually in conflict, so they're going to survive the quest or the adventure. So they're still there. So, right, going from the work small, build out. You already have some components, some pieces that you didn't have to build.
Right.
That you just use them. And like we actually had someone ask us a question about one of our earlier videos about, well, what do you do if your players want to interact too much with your NPCs and the other stuff in the ready-made module? And our answer was, let them. It drags out the adventure further. You get more mileage out of the same thing. And if they enjoy those interactions, reuse those NPCs by all means.
Absolutely. Allow the characters to build your world through what's there. Now, yeah, you might have to think on the fly. You might have to be ready to be like, okay, well, they want to go talk to the blacksmith, and Griswold says, well, what can I do for you? And you just have to deal with it. And
well, here's what I would say about all that too. Just jot down notes as it's happening. Jot down notes.
Absolutely.
So this way, when when you go back to it and you use those same NPCs or scenarios, there's consistency.
Well, yeah, whether you're DMing off of a typical notebook, or whether you're DMing from a laptop, every time the players talk to an NPC, jot down their name, jot down something about them, and if anything important actually happens in regards to those characters, you need to keep those details down and be able to work from there. I mean, we've had campaigns where we've made NPCs something important just based on the stories that have actually happened. Whether you've rescued someone that was not really meant to be there, or whether it's just like, oh well, they're not going to try and save that guy. It's just all of those things are important. I had a character who wound up making a shrine to his nature god, and it wound up creating some kind of treant that was in the middle of a town, and he was always there. And now we've got an NPC to talk to, and it was really cool. And that was a player-driven situation. That wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have said, "Yeah, I want to do this."
And here's the other thing too. Like, here's what you could also do as the game master. Have one of your players be a note taker. So, and at the end, especially with technology and what it is now, it's real easy for someone to do it electronically and then give you a copy of the notes at the end. Because what you may find is he puts things in his notes that he found that were important, that you glossed over, and you're like, oh well, you can latch onto it and use it later. See, because in their mind they've already created this importance and relevance that you would have never saw, and so when you reintroduce it again, they won't even get the correlation that they sparked it. They kind of did the work for you. But anyway, this video is getting kind of long. We've been chatting for a while about stuff that has to do with building campaigns and not. So, with that, we're gonna sign off. For the mothers out there,
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day. Click like, subscribe, comment below. You can find us in other spots. We're gonna put some links below to help you out.
And until next time, stay nerdy.